Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Canon. This video is the first in a series in which we'll be taking an in-depth look at the Book of Boba Fett. The show's first season wrapped up just about a month ago, and unfortunately, lots of people were disappointed with how Boba was portrayed. They're saying he was too much of a punching bag, a pushover, and definitely not a crime lord. I know I had some similar concerns as I was watching the show week by week as well. So now that the first season's over, we're going to go back and take a detailed look at each episode and see how we feel about it now. As always, let me know if you agree, disagree, or spotted something I completely missed in the comments as we go. Frankly, I think a lot of people will find that they feel differently about the show when watching it a second time. This is because for a huge chunk of the first season, there's actually two story arcs running side by side. You've got Boba's flashbacks of his life among the Tuskens, or what I'm calling flashbactas, since he only seems to get them while he's in the Bacta tank. And then you've got the current storyline of Boba as the new daimyo of Mos Espa. This juggling act of having two detailed story arcs running in parallel for multiple episodes may be an interesting artistic decision, but I think it actually hurt the show overall. This is largely because while he's trying to establish himself as the new crime lord of Mos Espa, Boba's acting different. He doesn't seem like the Boba we know from the original trilogy or the Clone Wars TV show. He was freaking ruthless in that show. We don't know why he's so nice and forgiving until we get to the critical points of the Tusken storyline. As we go through the first episode, I'll point out examples of this. Frankly, I wish they would have given us all the Tusken storyline in the first episode or two, and then focused exclusively on the daimyo storyline for the remainder of the season. This would have made it a lot easier to understand why Boba's suddenly acting like a good guy. Anyway, let's jump into the episode itself and I'll show you what I mean. The first episode starts off really strong with Boba having a flashback. We get some epic shots of Kamino and young Boba holding Jango's helmet in the arena on Geonosis, and this was great because I think we're all pretty sick of the way the sequel trilogy completely ignored the prequel era. Then we jump to Boba inside the Sarlacc. He seems to just be having flashbacks to traumatic events in his life. While inside the Sarlacc, he sees a dead stormtrooper whose armor is pitted and melting from the digestive acids. Struggling to breathe, he rips into the stormtrooper's helmet for the oxygen line, catches his breath, and then uses his flamethrower to barbecue the Sarlacc from the inside out. Everything about this opening scene was epic, including the show's new theme song. Once Boba gets out of the Sarlacc pit, Jawas make off with his armor, and then he's captured/rescued by Tusken Raiders. And we can pretty quickly see that these Tuskens are different than any we've seen before. For one thing, their clothes are very different. They wear a lot more black as opposed to straight brown or tan. The robes are a lot more detailed and ornate, and they even have jewelry of a sort. We'll find out later in the show that the differences between this particular tribe and the other Tuskens go way beyond just their clothes, though. One night, Boba's able to subdue a Massif, and that's the name for the giant lizard dog that the Tuskens keep as pets. We also saw these in The Mandalorian, as well as the Clone Wars when Ahsoka is making her escape from the Republic prison on Coruscant. Boba actually uses the Massif's own teeth to cut his wrist bindings. This is a great idea, it shows how resourceful Boba is. Also, he does all this while his hands are still tied. The dude is freaking tough. But this is where the problems start. The Tusken Kid sees Boba escaping and runs to stop him. By the way, the Tusken Kid is actually played by Wesley Kimmel. That's the nephew of Jimmy Kimmel, just a fun fact. Anyway, Boba easily disarms him and throws him to the ground. But then he just takes off running into the Dune Sea, even though the entire Tusken camp has clearly been alerted to the fact that he's getting away. I mean, does he seriously think he's just gonna get away? Why doesn't Boba grab and ransom the kid for his own freedom? Or at least use him as a human shield or something to aid in his escape? I don't know. Maybe he's delirious and dehydrated from the Sarlacc, but he was cognizant enough to take on a Massif with his hands tied. I don't know. This is the first time I felt like Boba was acting out of character. Then we get a pretty great scene where the female Tusken, known in the credits as the Tusken Warrior, takes Boba to town with her gaffy stick. Wait, that did not come out right. Whatever. Anyway, as awesome as the fight is, the thing that stands out to me more is that the other Tuskens are showing restraint. They stand back with the chief and watch as, what I assume is his wife, wails on Boba. We're again seeing that these aren't your average Tuskens who mindlessly attack and kill anyone they see. The fight itself looks great, and my only beef with this scene is that Boba gets absolutely clobbered across the face by the warrior's gaffy stick, but has zero bruising, bleeding, swelling, anything. At first I wrote this off since the show's on Disney Plus and meant for families, but there's plenty of violence later on in the show, so I don't know, just a minor gripe. At this point, Boba gets woken up by Fennec Shand, and the flashback ends. Next, Boba essentially holds court from Jabba's throne, where an Aqualish pays him tribute, followed by Doc Strassi, who is the leader of the Trandoshans in Mos Espa. This idea of paying tribute to the crime lord is something we've seen throughout actual history, notably among pirates who often paid tribute to the captain. Anyway, Doc Strassi was an old employer of Boba's and is actually the first person to refer to him as a daimyo. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'd never heard the word daimyo before this episode. So I did a little digging to see if this was like a Star Wars term that I'd somehow missed, but it's actually a Japanese word for a feudal baron, or the equivalent of a lord in medieval Europe. A daimyo ruled over a small town or city, with those who lived there essentially paying him for protection and land. This is really interesting because it's similar to how Jabba functioned as a crime lord, and how many of the mobsters of the early 20th century operated as well. But in medieval times, as well as in Boba's scenario, they maintained power through honor and respect, as opposed to violence and extortion. Next, Mayor Mok Shaiz's major domo comes to speak with Boba. Interestingly, we never actually learn the major domo's name in the entire first season. They just keep calling him the major domo. Anyway, he refuses to pay tribute to Boba and actually has the audacity to request tribute from him. It's weird, but even though the major domo is overblown, flamboyant, pretentious, I can't help but find him funny. I've actually ended up liking him because he's so over the top. Anyway, Boba turns to Fennec and says, "I'm the crime lord. He's supposed to pay me." Now this is where I want to make an important point. Boba Fett is not a crime lord in this show. I mean, that would necessitate his having committed crimes of one sort or another, but he never does that. Sure, he wants tribute, aka protection money from those he oversees, but he's actually cleaning up his territory. We'll see this more in later episodes, so I won't dig into it too much here, but Doc Strassi, remember that's the Trandoshan gang leader, was right to call Boba a daimyo. Daimyos lead with honor and respect, literally what Boba says he's trying to do in a couple of scenes, while crime lords threaten, extort, and actually commit crime. We get another example of this like 30 seconds later when Boba says to the two Gamorreans, "I do not torture." Boba may say he's a crime lord, but actions speak way louder than words. Next, we see Boba and Fennec heading to the local cantina, the Sanctuary, but he refuses to be carried on a litter or a palanquin. Again, not very crime lord-esque. Fennec's clearly catching on to this too because she tells Boba things would go a lot smoother if you accepted their ways, in reference to the Hutts. As they enter the Sanctuary, the band is actually playing a stylized rendition of the original Cantina song from A New Hope. For copyright reasons, I'm not going to play it here, but go take a listen. I think you'll hear it pretty easily now that you're looking for it. As he enters the Cantina, Boba removes his helmet. This was again something that rankled me the first time I saw it. Boba's not supposed to take off his helmet. Half of what made him so mysterious and popular in Empire and Return of the Jedi was the fact that he never took off the helmet. He was cool, mysterious, intimidating. But again, I think Boba is not going for fear and intimidation here. He wants those he oversees to trust and respect him. He wants them to know his face. At this point, we still don't know why he wants this. We don't know why he's departing from his old bounty hunter ways, but we'll find out soon enough. Garsa Fwip, who's the Twi'lek running the Sanctuary, asks Boba if he'd like his Gamorreans, quote, hosed down and fed while they talk. Talk about throwing shade, and she says it right in front of him too. Unlike the Major Domo, she does pay tribute to Boba, having her servants fill his helmet with New Republic credits. The show takes place about 5 years after the Battle of Endor, but it looks like the New Republic has already got its own currency in place. Another interesting note, New Republic credits are coins in the more traditional sense, whereas the Republic used ingots, not coins, during the prequel era. As they leave the Sanctuary, Boba tells Fennec that Jabba had many vassals. This is more allusion to the feudal systems of medieval Europe and Japan. A vassal is a person under the protection of a feudal lord who's pledged their loyalty to the daimyo or the lord. Boba then says, Jabba ruled with fear, I intend to rule with respect. Definitely a daimyo, not a crime lord. At this point, they get jumped by a group of assassins called the Order of the Night Wind. This is the first mention of this group of assassins in any Star Wars media, so maybe they're relatively new, or maybe arising since the fall of the Empire. We later learn that they're only allowed to operate in Hutt space, so they may be like a subsidiary of the Hutts or something. Immediately, we see that Boba's hand-to-hand and melee combat skills are hugely improved since his fight with the Tusken warrior at the beginning of the episode. However, as I watch this scene, I can't help but ask myself, Why doesn't he just use his jetpack and rain fire and rockets down on the assassins from above? He wouldn't have to abandon Fennec to do this, and he would break the enclosure that the assassins have set up around them. We do finally see Boba acting like the bounty hunter we know and love when he disintegrates one of the assassins as he tries to flee. And yes, I know it's probably not technically a disintegration. While Fennec hunts down the remaining assassins, the Gamorreans get Boba back to his Bacta. I guess you could say they've got his Bacta. Sorry, terrible joke. This is when Boba has another flashback. For the last part of this episode, the Tusken Kid puts Boba and the Rodian who squealed into a chain gang and marches them out into the Dune Sea to dig for black melons, which are apparently a major water source for the Tuskens. You'll remember that we've seen these before in The Mandalorian when he and Cobb Vanth were trying to make a deal with their local tribe of Tuskens to take down the Krayt Dragon. On the way, they see a Nikto swoop gang robbing a moisture farmer. This will be important in later episodes. While they're digging for black melons, I again found myself wondering why Boba doesn't just take out the Rodian and escape. He can clearly take both the Tusken Kid and the Massive. I mean, he did it before with his hands bound. And the Rodian not only ratted him out when he tried to escape the first time, but starts calling him Slimo and Poodoo as they're digging. This is actually another great prequel reference, as Slimo and Poodoo were both introduced as Star Wars curse words in The Phantom Menace. If you remember, Sebulba was throwing those around. Gotta love the prequel love. But seriously, they're out in the middle of nowhere, away from all the other Tuskens. Boba should take out the Rodian and then make his escape. While Boba wanting to be respected as daimyo is understandable based on what we'll learn about him in the next few episodes, this frankly doesn't make any sense in this scene. The Tuskens have done nothing to win Boba's loyalty up to this point. If he got the chance to escape, he would take it. As they're digging for black melons, the Rodian finally gets what's coming to him when he unearths a behemoth, which is actually a monster that was introduced to Star Wars back in the 1977 Marvel comic. This scene's great. The behemoth looks amazing, like a monster from all those classic horror films, and Boba actually kills the behemoth the same way Leia killed Jabba. Kind of a cool nod there. But once again, Boba returns to the Tuskens with the kid after he's killed the behemoth. This just doesn't make sense. They've done nothing but tie him to a freaking post, for crying out loud. As I was rewatching this part, I started wondering if maybe he thought they were too far from civilization for him to be able to get away. But the moisture farm from just a few minutes earlier in the episode was within walking distance. Anyway, the episode ends with the Tusken chief grudgingly handing Boba a black melon to drink as a sign of respect or maybe gratitude for saving the kid. Overall, I really liked the first episode. The action scenes are great, CGI's top-notch, and I don't even mind how Boba's being such a nice guy as the daimyo, now that we know what will eventually happen to him with the Tuskens. Really, the only parts that bugged me were when Boba made nonsensical decisions while he was with the Tuskens. He just took off running without taking the kid hostage when he tried to escape for the first time, and then when the behemoth killed the Rodian and he easily could have escaped from the kid, he didn't even try. That aside, I am really liking the dichotomy this first episode is set up between what it means to be a crime lord versus a daimyo. Crime lords like Jabba, the Pikes, Black Sun, Crimson Dawn, and the Shadow Collective all maintain their control through fear, violence, threats, and extortion. A daimyo, on the other hand, leads with respect and honor. Though we see how Boba has changed in the first episode, we don't see why until episode 2. So with that in mind, I hope you liked this pretty in-depth analysis of the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett. If you did, please hit those subscribe and like buttons. This is only my third ever YouTube video, so the YouTube algorithm won't promote these videos without likes and subscriptions from you guys. Be sure to also let me know if you agree with my analysis in the comments, and also let me know if I missed something. Keep an eye out for the second episode of my Book of Boba Fett series in the next few days, where we'll see why Boba has turned from a cold-blooded bounty hunter to a benevolent daimyo. Thanks, guys, and may the Force be with you.